This is the rough draft for Group 2's final project. It deals with the line of duty death report of Cincinnati firefighter Oscar Armstrong III from 2003. During this presentation, I'd like to kind of talk about the background of this fire, look at some contributing failures, some solutions that might have addressed the problem, and we'll look at our two comparables, a career firefighter paramedic death in California from 2011 and a career firefighter death in an apartment building fire in New York in 2007. And then we'll have a conclusion. The flashover that killed Oscar also injured two other firefighters, and this fire occurred in the Cincinnati neighborhood of Bond Hill on March 21st, 2003. The fire was on Laidlaw Road in a regular 1.5-story single-family dwelling, our bread and butter house fire. Oscar was a 3-year veteran of the Cincinnati Fire Department and 25 years old at the time of his death. His cause of death was severe third-degree burns. This is part of a newspaper article written at the time of his death. Oscar Armstrong III, a 25-year-old firefighter with 3 years' experience, 2 children, and a pregnant fiancée, lost his life battling a house fire in Bond Hill. He was pronounced dead at University of Cincinnati Hospital at 9:28 a.m. after leading a fire hose into the front room of a house that became superheated to the point that plumes of flame spontaneously burst. The event is called a flashover. The main floor of the house flashed over on the firefighters due to a number of things that led to the death and the injuries. The hazards and mistakes lined up perfectly to make this incident a textbook Swiss cheese model example. Here's a view of the house from the street and after the fire. It is a normal, not that large, 1.5-story frame dwelling. We go on these all the time. Here's an aerial view of the house on the day of the fire. You can see the holes cut in the roof. You can see the dormer where the fire came out, vented out those windows, and some of the overhaul stuff there on the roof. But look at the hose lines. One of the problems in this fire was Cincinnati's long attack lines. Look at the attack line hose completely surrounding this house. Hose everywhere. That'll be a contributing factor. After the fire, each district sent 1 company per hour to the scene, and a member of the training bureau walked them through the scene, explaining the events to the best of their abilities. This continued for the next 2 shifts. Let's go through the timeline. At 8:45 that morning, there was a call from 1131 Laidlaw. Engine 2, Engine 9, Truck 2, Truck 32, and District 3 were all dispatched immediately. At 8:47, dispatch confirms a structure fire. District 4, who was in the area, reports heavy black smoke. At 8:48, District 4 assumes Laidlaw command. Also at 8:48, he reports heavy fire on the first floor of a single-family dwelling. And at 8:49, Engine 9 arrives on the scene at 11:31 Laidlaw. So the first engine was on the scene in 4 minutes. 4 minutes from the time of the call. And then to continue at 8:52, start the water as requested by Engine 9 crew on the radio on Channel 1. At 40 seconds later, 8:52, here comes the water. At that same time, the flashover occurs. So 9 minutes, not even 9 minutes from the time of the initial 911 call is the flashover. At 8:53, first emergency tone broadcast. Everyone out of the building. Also at 8:53, a second alarm is sounded for additional crews. At 0900, Engine 32 attempts to make the second floor for a search. At 0900, Engine 2's captain reports, "We have a firefighter down on the first floor." At 0900 hours and 30 seconds, District 4 confirms a firefighter is down. Emergency tones are dropped. At 0901, District 4 states, let's get this firefighter out and go defensive. At 0902 and 50 seconds, a firefighter victim is coming through the window, reported by Engine 2's crew. At 0903, on an open mic, who is this guy? At 0903 and 15 seconds, still an open mic, who is this? At 0903:30, still an open mic, we get, hey, we got somebody down here, damn. 10 seconds later, at 9:03 and 40 seconds, we have Engine 32 reporting that all the second floor fire is knocked down except one room. At 9:04 and 10 seconds, accountability calls to Engine 9. Engine 9, your location. He repeats the call 10 seconds later. Engine 9, your location. 10 seconds after that, Engine 9 officer reports that Engine 9 officer and driver operator are located outside at Engine 9. At 09:04:40, 10 seconds later, accountability asks Engine 9 where the rest of his crew is, and he gets no answer. At 09:06, District 1 notifies crews that a firefighter is down and there's a possible fatality, and we are going defensive. Finally, 5 minutes later at 9:09:40, Engine 9 officer reports to accountability that firefighter Armstrong is missing. At 10:05, NIOSH and OSHA are notified of the incident. Division 4 saw 3 firefighters on the front porch after the flashover. Engine 9 officer has assumed that the 3 firefighters were his crew and they had evacuated successfully. But actually, the 3 firefighters were Firefighter 2 from Engine 9, Firefighter 1 from Engine 2, and Firefighter 2 from Engine 32. So 3 different crews, 1 person each. Immediate post-flashover, nobody recognized that there was a missing firefighter on the fire scene. Here's a look of the first floor plan. You can see it's not a big house. Living room at the front door comes right into the living room. You have a dining room, a small eat-in kitchen, and then the staircase going to the second floor or down to the basement. Here's the floor plan with the overlay of where stuff happened at the fire scene. You can see that the 350-foot attack line there in the side yard was part of the problem. We'll get into that in a minute, and you may need to refer back to this. But the flashover occurred right after they went in the front door, and Oscar was seen going on into the fire after, where the other 2 gentlemen come out the front door, and he was found in the living room and removed out that side window there toward the back. In our humble opinion, a lot of the problems leading up to this death were because of Cincinnati's 350-foot long pre-connected hose lines. They laid this attack line to this fire. The front door was locked initially. They took the line around back. Incident commander was in the back of the house doing his 360. He told him to force entry in the front door. They brought the line back around to the front. The line still was not charged. The officer had asked for water twice. And the driver operator had given water, had charged the line, but there was a miscommunication there about whether or not they had water at the nozzle. They did not have water at the nozzle, but the driver operator had charged the line. Well, here the line was out in some bushes and was tangled and kinked, and there was no pressure. So the lieutenant ends up leaving the front porch to go out and talk to the driver operator about why he doesn't have any water. He finds the kink, and he's away from the firefighters when they make entry, trying to get the kinks out of the line. It was just too much hose for a small single family home fire, in our opinion. Another one of the problems here is the officer leaving his crew. The Engine 9 officer leaves the front porch to go find out why he doesn't have water. After talking to the operator, he figures out that it's kinks, and he fixes it himself instead of delegating it. He's away from his crew when they make entry, and they go ahead and force the door and make entry with an uncharged line. and they quickly realize they're in a very hot situation. They should have backed right back out until they had water, and they didn't, and it cost Oscar his life. Poor situational awareness goes hand in hand with the previous slide. The officer leaves his crew. He's dealing with the issue of getting them water, so that's good, but he loses track of where his crew is. And then post flashover, he looks up on the porch, he sees 3 firefighters, he thinks his crew's all there. So, there's a delay in realizing that they have a firefighter missing, at least at the officer level where there's communication back to command. We felt there was a training issue at this fire. Firefighters should have been able to recognize that the heat level at the floor being that extreme meant a flashover was likely. And they should not have advanced into the room that far without a charged hose line. They shouldn't have advanced in at all. And yet they did. They got into mid-room in that heat and were there at the time of the flashover without a charged hose line. And, that flashover simulator and flashover training is prevalent in the fire service today. We're really supposed to be working on recognizing those signals that a flashover is likely and reacting accordingly. And it didn't happen here. Officer has a lot of responsibility at a fire. That's why he gets the big bucks. And he has to be able to delegate those jobs. So being away from his crew, you gotta know where your crew are. You gotta be with them. You gotta know where they are. And overall, it happened so quickly, and I can understand him because he's asking for water. The driver operator's saying he's giving him water, but he's got no water. So, I can see that to a point. But he should have either told the crew to stay out and not go in until he got back, or he should have stayed and sent somebody else out to figure out what the problem was. And you got 350 feet of hose laying in the side yard. There's a good chance that's where your problem's going to be. And but to have the officer himself leave the crew and then have them go ahead and go in, it was a pretty big mistake in this situation. The NIOSH report had some recommendations. And some of them dealt with, the SOPs. Was there an SOP there for going into a fire environment without a charged hose line? The radio traffic was pretty unorganized. You had unidentified voices. You had requests that were going unanswered. Accountability, water supply. You had ventilation, uncoordinated ventilation or no ventilation yet. Of course, this happened very early in the fire. You didn't have a set up RIT team right away. You had some organizational issues there, some SOP type things. Some of the techniques to prevent this type of a incident: make sure your RIT team's established prior to your interior attack. Now, they were legal here. They had crews going in. They met the 2 in 2 out. But they did not have their RIT team completely established, and you had a lot of heat. This was a big fire inside of here. I'm not sure that was appreciated quick enough, and really haven't talked about it. But we did talk about small 1.5 story everyday bread and butter fire. This fire started on the stove. This is a cooking fire. We go on these all the time, and maybe part of that was just a simple fire, and maybe some of this stuff got, that's not that important, or it doesn't have to be done yet. It's a small building, simple fire. But, it needs to be done every time. The RIT team, very important. Crew continuity is also really important. It kind of got screwed up here. Part of that may have been dragging the hose line around the back and then coming back around. By the time they got up on the porch, they didn't have water. Trying to figure out the kinks, they had to force entry. They ended up with a firefighter from another crew. So you had some crew continuity issues there. The officer left them, so there was no officer there keeping track of that. The radio traffic was, disorganized, and we need to have them important and urgent messages said over the radio. Firefighters in distress need to get put on a separate channel. And, we've really worked since this fatality. Departments have really worked on their Maydays and their processes and SOPs for these kind of fires. And can't say enough about, SOPs, about having procedures that everybody understands. We gotta have a charge hose line to go into a burning structure. Got to. That's from drill school. 350-foot hand lines. There may be a place for those in a 4 or 5 story apartment building, but it's 7 sections of 1 3/4 hose, kinks, and when you're trying to go right in the front door, not very far from the engine, that's a lot of hose to have to manage, and that was definitely a problem here. So they're pretty basic. These mistakes made for this fire were basic training mistakes, basic, very simple things. It was not a big complicated situation. It was simple failures that led to this fatality. For our comparables, we looked at NIOSH report 2011-13, where a career lieutenant and a firefighter paramedic die in a hillside residential house fire in California. And we looked at 2003-12, where a career firefighter dies in a fall from a roof in an apartment building fire in New York. Our comparables, similarities, they were all career firefighters. All were on the first due apparatus. There was problems with communications. There was problems with accountability. We had problems with the size up or reporting changes when they happened. Some of our differences, the 2011-13, they had more experience than the other 2 incidents. The 27-19 guy was also very young. He was not killed inside the fire. He was up on, climbing up onto the roof and fell to his death. So that was the difference there. Everybody was career firefighters. A lot of the similarities there were a lot of basic safety, communication, accountability, SOP type things that were missing. That really was what made them good comparables. In conclusion, we felt that all 3 of these incidents fell under high risk, low frequency. Now I know I talked on and on about how Oscar's fire was the bread and butter everyday house fire. But in truth, even that is a pretty high risk, low frequency event. It doesn't happen every day. That set of circumstances that lead you into the building right at the time of flashover, that's pretty low frequency. A lot of times the fire's still on the stove. You go in, you take the stove, you go out, you take care of it right there. Hand tank or dry chem or whatever. It's not a big deal. So we had a high risk, low frequency situation, all 3 of these. SOPs were involved, communication and training, all very, very much involved in these deaths. Cincinnati and California, you had size up and ventilation issues, changing fire, not noticing changing conditions quick enough. In the New York fall, the young firefighter who was tasked with that assignment should not have done it the way that it was done. He took on too much. He put himself in too precarious of a position, and it should not have been done the way it was done. Crew size, we didn't really talk about crew size. Cincinnati, crew size was not really a factor there. Some of the California fire departments are running short crews. In New York, you don't have enough people on the scene quick enough to do the tasks that need to be done. That's a reoccurring theme in firefighter fatalities, always has been. Well, at least in modern times, probably always will be. So that's our rough draft. I'm going to try to get a better microphone so I can be easier heard, and obviously going to redo some of these where there's talk that wouldn't be in the final. But this should give you an idea of where we're at and what we did our report on.